What's going on, people? We are excited for another episode of Volnay Live. We have a guest tonight of Pat Connaughton of the Milwaukee Bucks. This is going to be a little bit of a change up. We are going to get a little bit away from design stuff, talk more real estate, how you start up a real estate business, the things you can do when finding projects, what buyers are looking for, and kind of how he balances his NBA career with a career in real estate development and how that process has gone. And I'm really excited to chat with him. And throughout the whole interview, we'll take your questions and we'll try to get to every single question at the end of the interview. So you can use the questions option, or you can send them in the comments, and we'll try to get to them all at the end of the episode. So as soon as he gets joined in here, we will get started. Should have him joining in any second. Thanks everybody for joining us on this Friday night. I think, his story is extremely interesting. It kind of shows how someone can, take a career in one thing and then build a career in something else. Really excited to dig in on how that process occurred and, how he ended up in this position today. So, let's see here. What's up, brother?
What's good, man?
How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing all right, hanging in there.
Good. You safe, healthy, the whole nine?
Family's good, hanging in there, ready to get back to work. But seems like things are going to start up next week, but it's gonna take a little while.
Yeah, for sure. Well, at least you got health is what we can count on at the moment, right?
Yeah. What about you? How's everything going?
Everything's good. Out here in Milwaukee currently. Just trying to stay active, stay busy, do some things. We haven't obviously been able to do much basketball wise, so it's been a little bit slower than normal, but allows me to get into real estate a little bit more, which is nice.
Yeah, so I kind of gave a little intro before, but we're extremely excited to have you. I think this is a little bit of a change up from the other interviews. We've had almost every host of HGTV on here over the past 2 months, but this time we're going to get into a little more about the back end side of the real estate business, more into real estate investing, finding properties, and kind of how you started up your business. So I know we've got a bunch of people, tons of questions. So everybody keep sending in your questions. We'll get to them all at the end. But Pat, how'd you end up, first of all, in the NBA, but then what made you want to get into real estate?
Yeah. So, for me, the NBA obviously was a dream of mine since I was a kid. So that was a little bit different. Oh shoot. Sorry. I don't know how I did that. The NBA was a dream of mine since I was a kid, but, that was just your simple stuff, hard work, dedication. Obviously you got to have a little bit of skill involved with that, but, it was something that I always dreamed of doing. So I'm fortunate to be here. But as far as, real estate, my dad was a general contractor. So I grew up around it. I actually worked on his job sites and things of that nature, in junior high school and as I got into high school and stuff. And so, I had a little bit of like a background in it, not necessarily the financial side. I was hauling lumber, sheetrock, cleaning up job sites, throwing stuff in dumpsters, things like that. So it wasn't anything glamorous, but it was still fun to be a part of and fun to see, a house or a piece of property, a piece of land that he would buy and redevelop and kind of see how it changed from something nobody really wanted to something everybody wanted to pay a good chunk of money for. As I got into sports and pro sports and, was fortunate enough to have some finances to invest, I thought I had a passion for real estate because of my dad. I grew up around it. I kind of saw the high level workings of it, and I wanted to kind of dive in and, work with him and find a me from my own personal development side.
Nice. So let's kind of get into that first deal. So how did that come about? Obviously you were working with your pops, but what was the first deal that you jumped into yourself, and, kind of run us through how you found it, what was it, and how did it turn out?
Yeah. So for me, the first deal I did was just a typical, house flip. I was obviously fortunate to at such a young age to have an income like I did via pro sports, but I also didn't have an income that were nearly as high as my peers, if you will. So all
Yeah.
I could afford to do was a house flip, and so I got involved in it in Portland, Oregon, where I started to play at the beginning. And for me, it was about we found a property, we redid the kitchens and baths, and bought it for 500,000 bucks, and was out of it for 580. Probably put 25 into it or something, so made like 45, 50 grand. And it was cool to see that process and see how it worked. And obviously there are added expenses there that you don't see until you get involved. You don't really understand how quickly they add up, as far as the interest and as far as real estate commissions. And sooner or later, all that hard work that you put into flipping that home, the profit itself isn't all that high at the end of the day, and for the money that you're risking potentially. And so I think what I learned early on was, my dad had a great model because it's what he did for a living. So he found big pieces of land, or based off the properties that he GC'd or started to GC in his younger days, he had clientele that were interested in luxury homes. So the higher end of homes that he did, the bigger the profit was as a developer. And what I noticed was, for myself personally, I'm in a different position than my father. Obviously, the money that I make comes from, a different line of work. It comes from my day job, basketball. So how am I going to take the things that I've learned from him and find ways to obviously work with him and utilize his expertise, but do it in a little bit of a different way that helps benefit me, because I'm coming from a different angle. And so after we did a few house flips, I started to see real estate from a different side, from cash flowing properties, and finding mentors that came from a different angle, or mentors that had a day job, but who were Notre Dame guys that I got to know, and things of that nature. And for me, it was really eye opening to see the first deal happen, and then to see how I could pivot, if you will, into another line of real estate.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, so first deal, what are, just for people that are following along, I know you mentioned the expenses, and that's something that newbies always miss. It's like all the line items. And if you're getting started on an early project, find someone, like a mentor or someone who can at least give you a historical budget that you can like fill in the blanks. There's going to be so many things, probably like 15 things that you didn't even think of when it comes to expenses. So that's kind of that side of it. So now that you've continued to do that part of the business and you're pivoting into the more cash flowing, kind of talk about that. What type of deals are you looking for? How are you analyzing them? And then what's your involvement? Because I think one of the main questions everyone has is they say, I have a job. I don't have time to, to be doing real estate on the side. And like, clearly you have a career and you're still able to run, now a growing real estate development company. So how do you balance that?
It's about time management. You have time for whatever you deem necessary, or deem a priority in your life, I would say. So for me, I'm involved pretty heavily. My dad looks after it day to day. And my buddy, who I grew up with, and business partner, Joe, works, as a project manager as well. So he's on it daily. And I'm on all the high level stuff, and we've started to grow quite a bit. So we have 6 projects going, or 6 projects that are either about to start, are in the development process, or have just finished. And they're all either mixed use or multi-family, multi-unit buildings, which have been great. So we're starting to really kind of grow that portfolio. And I'm involved in it pretty heavily, and I enjoy the process, and I enjoy finding time. As a pro athlete, it's a little different. I got to shout out Mo Harkless. He's commenting quite a bit. Him and I have had a lot of talks about real estate. I show my boy Shabazz on here as well, who's trying to get involved in the game, which has been great, and asking me a bunch of questions. And I think that's kind of like you alluded to, Ricky, is like, not everyone came from a real estate background, but if you can find people who are involved in it, you can ask some questions, you can start to learn from some people. That's like where it all starts. And I learned from my dad. I was fortunate; it was in my own house. But I've learned a lot more from other people in recent years as well, just because I've asked the questions and I've tried to get out there and learn from people who I've seen have success in real estate. I mean, just the other day when you and I were on the phone, we started going back and forth on the different projects that we're doing and the things that you're doing in the Boston area, things that I'm doing in the Milwaukee area, how they relate, how they're different. Price per square foot's different in each area. And I think the biggest thing of advice that I would give to people is you have to, if you have another job, like, you have to find the time if you really want to do it. You have to put the time and effort in. And as a professional athlete, obviously my number one priority is basketball, but we have time on airplanes. We have time, when we're in the hotel room, we have time to learn about it. And we have time to not just learn about it, but take the necessary steps to start it. And I would say it's the same, maybe on a different scale for those other people that have day jobs. So, for me, the biggest advice I would say is you want to try to find somebody, you want to reach somebody, you want to network with somebody who's been involved in the business, who is willing to help. Because I think what I've learned from not just my dad, but other Notre Dame mentors that I have is doing good business with good people. They're helping mentor me because they expect me to mentor somebody later on. And if you can build a successful business, there's going to be plenty of people that will want to learn from you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if someone's reaching out to a mentor, you're trying, if it feels like you're pulling teeth for them to give you the time of day or to talk to you, move on. There's enough people that are passionate about real estate and passionate about what they're doing that when you reach out to them and they're, ask for advice or to look for them as a mentor, there's people out there that will give you the time. So if, it shouldn't feel like you're forcing someone to help you out. And I think when you're working with that mentor, try to add value to them in any way you can. And that could be as simple as like, hey, can I just hop in my truck and drive over and pick up some plans for you? Or like, any little task that might take something off of their plate. So just try to do something to give back. And, I look at it in the long term where I say, if it might not be right now, and like, I'll take every meeting. So I've probably sat down with like 300, 400 people over the past 5 years. And I'll take every single meeting when someone wants to sit down or talk. And, it's crazy over those 5 years of how many times those people have paid it forward for me. I swear to God, people think it's crazy that I take these meetings. And next thing you know, someone's, working in a town for the zoning board or sitting on a planning board, or those are crazy ones. And it's like, how does that happen? I took the kid to coffee or breakfast, and then 4 years later, he's sitting on the planning board of a town where I'm trying to get a project approved. Like, that's the definition of karma.
Yeah, absolutely. Small world out there.
Yeah. And like, so those type of things. So, but so for the business now, so you said you've got about like, 7 projects going. What type of projects are those? Are those flips? Or are they all the rentals now? And then where do you see the business going in the next, 3 to 5 years?
Those are all rentals now, cash flowing stuff. I would say, just in short, one of the buildings I'm doing in Milwaukee is a 3-unit residential building, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and then a 3-bedroom penthouse on the top. Another one we're doing in Milwaukee is a mixed-use building, retail or restaurant or something in the bottom, with a 2,500 square foot 3-bedroom apartment above it. I got 2 projects going around Notre Dame, both of mixed use with a little more residential heavy than commercial. But both have a little bit of each. And I think the idea behind them, and the idea behind it for myself personally, is just, if you can continue to build that portfolio while I'm fortunate to be in the NBA, while I'm fortunate to have another, line of income, can I build a real estate portfolio that helps, generate cash flow and income and value throughout my lifetime, and hopefully generationally. And I think that's the coolest part about it to date. I mentioned Mo and Shabazz chiming in here on the comments. Like, there's been a lot of NBA guys that have found ways to ask me to learn from me, but also to get involved. So out of those 4 projects I just mentioned, 2 of them we have other guys within the NBA invested. One of them we have 5 guys in the NBA invested. And I think just trying to really help other pro athletes get involved into a smart business venture, because I think guys are getting much better. The modern athlete's getting much better as far as finding ways to invest and not just spending their money, but you wanting to invest in the right sort of things is probably that next step. And real estate's been something that the wealthiest people in the world are involved in. The tax advantages of it, the fact that you can trade up, the 1031 exchange, the refinancing, the depreciation, all those sorts of things that you can do that will help you is incredible. So to try to get more athletes involved, more pro athletes involved, to kind of show them how that works and to make sure that they have means of income when their career is over. And that's been that next step for me in my business ventures, and that's been something that I've thoroughly enjoyed doing. And with those few properties that I mentioned, and with hopefully more to come, if I can do 2, 3, 4 properties a year, and I'm fortunate to be in the NBA for 10, 12 years, you start to build a pretty decent portfolio in different areas of the country too, which I think is pretty cool. I'd love to get back to Boston, obviously, and do some projects there as well, hopefully in the next few years. But to have projects in different areas kind of helps diversify that portfolio.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're looking at these projects and you're looking at doing a renovation on these, residential long-term holds, what are the things that you're first looking at? So say someone's trying to get into this business, they buy their first 3 family. What's the first thing you're looking at when making decisions on, how much work? Are you immediately gutting the project? Or are you doing more cosmetic? And how do you make that decision?
I think the decision is going to be predicated off, your personal finances. The things that I try to look at is I try to look ahead a little bit. When I'm looking at a project, I'm obviously first and foremost looking at the location of the project. How do I see this area growing and developing in the next few years or currently right now? Then I'm looking at the project itself. What does that project need? Based off what the listed price is, or if it's an off-market deal, which are things that I've really searched for, or through my connections, how much work needs to go into the project? Does it need to be gutted, like you mentioned, or is it more cosmetic? And what is the risk versus reward ratio when it comes to that investment price and that asking price? And then, based off being in a fortunate position with my dad, who was a general contractor for 30 years, we have the ability to do some of the work ourselves. We have the ability to mitigate some of that cost just based off the expertise that he has, and hiring subs, and him being able to do some of the work himself, different sorts of things. So I try to really look at it from a full picture, but I really want to know, since I'm looking to hold most of these, what is the market rate as far as rent? What are the things that we can do as far as adding value to the property? Those are probably the 2 biggest things for me, and they're all based off location, but mostly because I want to mitigate risk as much as possible. For my personal investments, for the investments obviously that I do with investors, especially, if we can mitigate risk so that we can play a little bit on both sides, where, hey, the market rate rent is going to cover the mortgage. If we can maybe take an extra 2 months to redo the inside, not only are we going to be able to get a little more in rent, but the value of the overall building appreciates a little bit. We're creating value so that if or when the market fluctuates, because it always will, we're kind of giving ourselves a little bit of a buffer in the beginning.
Yeah. So you mentioned, 1031. I'm sure a bunch of people don't really understand, what that is. Can you give the people listening kind of an idea of, say, one of these assets you decide to do a 1031? How does that process work? And, what is a 1031?
Yeah, so it's part of the reason I got out of the flip game. 1031 exchange, obviously it's a tax benefit. So if in real estate, if you're realizing profit via real estate as opposed to having to pay tax on it, and for me personally, obviously, quite a bit of tax based off, my personal income, you can trade up. You can put that investment and that profit into another piece of real estate that's of the same value or more within 6 months. And it prevents you from having to pay tax on that go around. So a lot of people do this quite a bit, in house flips, or, as you were alluding to, in a cash flowing property, or in the properties that I'm trying to do. If for some reason, somebody did want to buy the entire building because of the portfolio, and maybe they had a 1031. I may be able to charge a premium, so it may be an offer that I can't refuse. And if my building, I was all into it for $1 million, and someone's offering me two, that $1 million of profit is going to cost me $500,000 to the federal government. But via the 1031 exchange, I can go and try to find another property, or maybe another two properties, or whatever it might be, and I can take that $1 million and I can buy another property with it. And as opposed to giving 500 to the federal government, I used that 500 that I had, to roll into another property, so that I just got a property for basically, half price of what I would have paid, and I can hold on to that property obviously for as long as I want. And if I ever did decide to sell it again, I could try to do the same thing to try to continue to avoid paying taxes on that profit that I would realize, because the federal government only sees you realizing profit when you sell something. So the reason that benefits me for cash flowing it and not selling is because as that loan or as that mortgage falls off, I can refinance it, but that money would be tax free, as opposed to if I had sold it, that money would then be taxed at a 50% rate.
Right. And yeah, the idea of a 1031 is, it's all of that. And then it's the fact that you're actually never even touching the proceeds, right? So there's an
Right.
agent involved. The sale goes through an agent. The agent helps you purchase the property. The money never actually touches your hands. Thus, there's no profits that are realized by you. It all passes through to a different real estate purchase. So now when you're looking into the business and as you're trying to build, are you guys going to get into bigger and bigger projects, or are you happy with how it's going? And, where do you see the next couple of years?
For sure. Yeah, you did mention that. I apologize I didn't answer it.
No.
We're trying to do a little bit of both. For me personally, like I said, mitigating risk is important for me, important for my investors, important for the people that I have involved in this company. So, we want to grow as far as size of projects. So let's just say the projects we're doing right now are anywhere between $1 million and $3 million, probably total. We'd love to get it up to, between $3 and $9 million projects. But we're not set on just growing by the size of each project. We can grow from a quantity of projects. So, maybe instead of doing one $9 million project, we're doing three $3 million projects or something of that nature. And I think a little bit of both, balance on both sides, trying to get to the point where, we are doing some bigger projects from a size of that specific project, but we're also doing more projects overall, so that portfolio is growing from a number standpoint, because then, obviously, you want each project to be successful, but the more projects you do, the less you're reliant on a certain one.
Yeah. So how are you sourcing these and finding these deals? I know you mentioned a lot of off-market stuff, and, how are the deals coming onto your plate? And then, are people calling you? How's that happening?
I'd say a mixture of both. We've sourced a lot of the beginning deals just on our own accord, on market deals that we've found in areas that we've liked, et cetera. But, as we've gotten bigger and as people have, tried to use my platform a little bit, try to be creative with it, right? So, as we've gotten bigger and as people kind of know, I'm in the real estate game, we get some cold calls. We get some people that reach out because they're looking to sell a building. And it works both ways, right? You got to be wary of people that reach out to you from a cold call standpoint. A lot of them look at me as a dollar sign because, they know I have a little bit of money from the NBA, or so they want to charge you over what it's probably worth. But to the same token, you can also use it to your advantage, because there are people that will call you because they understand you have the ability to buy a building and they're willing to sell it quick and easy at a discount, because they know that you can kind of pay for it and do it a little bit quicker and under the radar, and potentially without a realtor or any of those sorts of things that you kind of add value to. So you got to obviously read the situation. I think everything's situational, but to the same degree, I think the general knowledge of my involvement in real estate has really helped with deal flow. The more people know you're involved in real estate, you'd be shocked at the amount of people that are either trying to sell a house or get out of a building, or are looking to rent a building, or are looking to lease a space for their commercial business, or just the general knowledge. Think about it yourself, obviously us, but like anybody who's listening, like I'd rather do a deal with somebody who I know than somebody who I don't. It's the same thing when you're renting an apartment, same thing when you're leasing a commercial space. Like, people know I'm involved in real estate and they're looking for an apartment in downtown Milwaukee and they reach out to me, I'd rather lease it to them than to somebody I didn't know who's going to be in my building.
Yeah, I think the main, and people are like, oh, well, you're in the NBA. Of course, you get the platform. But what it comes down to is putting yourself out there. Like, if you're not letting people know that you're doing this, even if you're a newbie, right? Even if you've never done a deal, talk a big game. Put yourself out there. I'm in the real estate business. I'm going to be doing deals. Let people know you're looking. Because if you're just sitting behind your computer by yourself and not networking and not putting yourself out, no one's going to call you. So, get out there, try to meet people, and, I think try to build a business in that way. From the management side, I know you and I talked about this on the phone. So
Yep.
are you guys self-managing all these? And how's that going? You having fun yet?
Yeah. So the majority of them, yes, because of they're a little bit smaller deals, obviously. That was obviously one of the things we discussed, for obviously those on the listening in who obviously don't know what we discussed.
Yeah.
The management of properties is a unique. As you grow the portfolio, there are management companies that can do it for you, which is a completely hands-off process. And for some people, that's more beneficial, and they handle the rent, they handle everything with it, but they also take a percent fee. So trying to kind of weigh those two things and based off where the projects are. For me, obviously, my projects are in different parts of the country. I got one in Portland, I got some in Milwaukee, I got some in South Bend, potentially eventually some in Boston. So you can't have one management company necessarily do all of them. So now you're getting different fees and you're managing different management companies, but it might be even harder for me to do it myself. So at the moment, we're doing them ourselves, but as we start to grow the portfolio, we'll kind of look into it. If we can find good people that do the simple stuff, the maintenance, if there's any problems within the building, the trash, the things that you and I discussed, then maybe you're able to do the management yourself because you're able to rely on the people that are in there. And I know there's actually been a few Notre Dame mentors that I have who say they actually utilize people who are renting the building. They
Yeah.
find a good tenant and they're like, hey, if we give you either a discount on rent or a couple $100 a month, will you be the just overall watcher of the building and make
Yeah.
sure that things are getting done the right way and make sure when the maintenance guy comes, they do go to the right unit, et cetera. So I think there are different ways to kind of get creative in that aspect as well.
Yeah, I think, I went through the process where I was acquiring rentals, I was using property managers, and as the business grew, and then about 3 years ago, we decided to start a property management company and, start pulling assets back and doing it ourselves. And I think the main thing we looked at was technology, right? There is amazing platforms now. So we use a company called Buildium to, it allows us to collect all the rent, maintenance requests are all logged through there. Everything can be done through this portal. The tenant goes in there and everything can be done right through that. We use Z Deposit, which handles all security deposits. And last month's rent, you don't touch the money. That's like obviously the biggest risk when you're dealing with security deposits. So Z Deposit allows you to actually just type in the information and put in the tenant's email address and phone number. You can deposit their money right into the account, their check, and then you can send them an email for them to set up the bank account in their name. So it removes all that complication for you.
Wow.
And then the last thing we use in our management company that helps is Voice Nation. So Voice Nation is an answering service. They're based out of Atlanta, and you get a phone number, you pay a fee for every month, and when they answer it, it's 24 hours a day. They actually answer it and say Volnay Management, and so it's not a big expense. And now you have an answering service that answers 24 hours a day for you. What that can do, they can take it down and send you an email. So if you're busy, you can't take phone calls, they'll take the phone call and they'll write an email to you. If it's urgent, you can have a list of people for them to call other than you. So say they're calling about a property that you own in Milwaukee, right? You're going to have a list of the people that they call if it's a Milwaukee project, right? And then it's going to be your Milwaukee contacts.
Wow.
If it's in the list of Boston properties, they have Boston contacts. Right. And so, and they have plumbers and electricians and stuff like that. So it takes some time to get it all set up and build the network around it. But right there, I just walked you through what a management company is. Right.
Yeah,
And
100%.
so,
And that fee now doesn't go out of your pocket; it goes into your pocket.
yeah. And fees range anywhere from 5 to 10% from what a
Right.
management on top line rent. So that's huge. I mean, it swings a property significantly when you're able to self manage.
For
So
sure. I
um,
actually I had a good question somebody asked me, which I think you can speak to a little better than I can. Obviously I'm fortunate to be in the position I am, right? So I have some capital that I can expense towards investments and stuff, and it was easier for me technically to get started in that instance. How'd you get started with it?
yeah, so I started out in 2010, graduated from college, and wanted to buy my first investment property. So I ended up doing an FHA loan. Um, I ended up doing an FHA loan where um, I lived in one of the units, and then I renovated the other units. And so it was kind of I had to do 3.5% down, so it was a low fee. And so that's a great option for someone who's looking to get into real estate is by using the FHA financing. And so I was able to do that. I ended up repeating that and buying another property about a year later, and then through that journey acquired more rental properties. And so after doing 3 rentals, I did a cash out refinance, and was able to take $300,000 from my first 3 rentals and do my first condo conversion and get into that space. So, but I needed loans. Like I needed some money from the start. So I actually went to my mother for that first rental, and I asked her for that first loan. One thing when I mentor newbies and I say, they're like, oh, well, yeah, people aren't going to give me the money. I say, well, when you're approaching even a family member or a best friend, you treat that like you're going and talking to Mark Cuban, right? You formalize that deal. You make it pretty in Excel, in a PDF, or whatever it is, with exactly what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, and treat it like a business, and people will treat you like it's important, right? Too many people send me something, they send me like a text with a bunch of mess like information on it. I'm like, that's not going to get me to invest in your deal. So like when you're approaching a family member or a friend and looking to have them invest, make sure you go at it professionally. And so that's what I did. I actually in college I took a class on real estate finance. So when I went to my mother, I had a full like write up on why I was going to hit a home run with this deal. And she was like, and she trusted me. And still to this day, we've been getting better and better about being more professional and more professional. So, I think that's the key is this isn't a hobby. If you're going to do it right, you got to treat it like it's, this is a business.
100%. I think that's very well said. I think that translates at every level too. Even with people that started out with money like myself, it had nothing to do with, if I went to a bank and asked for a construction loan, but I didn't have good credit or I didn't have something that, showed what I was going to do, or I didn't have a track record, like I had to be as professional as possible. And even, when you start to work with people who are investors, they want to see professionalism. You want to make sure that you're treating it as a business because that's at the end of the day what you're trying to build within the real estate game.
Yeah, for sure. We got a bunch of questions. Let's see what we got here. Let's see. So this is Chris. He actually works for me at Volnay. Do you have someone to help you manage your project's financials, or do you guys do that all in house?
We do that all in house. I think understanding the project financials and understanding the I would say the DNA of each deal is really important, and especially when it comes to it being my either own capital or the capital of investors that we have. I want to know anything and everything about it. I want to see it. I want to know exactly how it's working. I want to know the ins and outs of it. Um, we have an accountant obviously that looks over everything at the end of the year and things of that nature. But for the most part, we're keeping track of all those financials. We're sending out quarterly reports, and we're making sure that each deal itself is like its own organism and it's stable, it's working, it's able to kind of fund itself while also spin off a return, all those sorts of things. But it's all done within our company.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you just hit on is as you start to grow in this business is understanding the idea of siloing. I think people don't understand it. I got lucky. One of my first mentors taught me about the idea of siloing in the real estate business. And what that means is every single project and every single asset you buy should be its own little business, right? That's its own LLC, its own little business, and you don't have them cross collateralized. You treat them as one after another. What that does is it protects you financially and it protects you legally. And so what that, if something was to happen with one of the assets, it wouldn't affect the other portfolio, right? So it's the idea of siloing. So every single asset can have its own LLC, and you're then able to have insurance for that, and they won't affect each other. I don't know if that's how you're doing it right now, but
Yeah,
it's
that's how
something
we
that
do it.
people should do.
Every single project's its own LLC, SPV, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's all under a LLC, a holding company, if you will. But that's the easiest and best way to do it, and not just easiest and best, it's the smartest way to do it.
Yeah. One thing we always get asked too is about, like, I know you have partners and stuff. So are they joining your company, or are you partnering on project by project?
Project by project. So
Yeah.
they're part of that LLC. So the LLC that we create for that project has the terms and conditions in it. And then that LLC owns that project. And that project is then owned by, my company, and my company owns a portion of that LLC. But it's project by project.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson. You've so many horror stories about people jumping in a true partnership where you're sharing every deal or every asset. It's like, start out just by working on one deal with a couple people. If that deal goes well, you work together on the next one and on the next one, and then maybe it grows into a business that you guys share. But in truth, just treat it deal by deal. I think that's the best way to do it.
Agreed.
Let's see here. Got more questions. What do you look for in properties before you decided to go buy them?
Good question. We look at things a little bit differently with my dad's expertise. Location is most important. So we actually have a saying, which isn't revolutionary. I'm sure other people use it, but we want to find like the worst property on the best block. For us, there are real estate investors that will go out and they're looking for cap rates. They're looking to buy things that are already done. They're looking to obviously just find a place to park their money and collect their return. For us, like I said, we want to create some value. So I want to find an up and coming area. I want to find a great area, and I want to find, a property that nobody wants because of the way it looks. It's like one we did in Milwaukee. The place was inhabitable. It was falling down. It was 2 units and it was right downtown. It was in a great location, but the seller couldn't sell it because nobody could move into it and nobody wanted to deal with, the zoning or going through the city or going through the things that you have to go through to tear it down and rebuild. It's money. It's an investment. It's a financial burden for some people. So those are actually the things we look for. So we want to find, distressed properties. We want to find distressed assets. We want to find things that, we can kind of get our hands on and either furbish the inside or renovate or tear down and build new. And we're in a different position, obviously, because we have experience from a general contractor. But I would say in general, the location is the number one priority for us.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned like finding the assets that are undervalued and stuff like that. And along with that is, don't be scared to make offers. If you're not making
Great
offers,
call.
you are not in the real estate business. So there's no such thing as a bad offer. If you're working with an agent who doesn't want to write it up because he doesn't think it's a good offer, get a new agent. And the idea is, you don't understand what's going on behind the scenes of the person selling. They could be one mortgage payment away from foreclosure. Like, they literally don't have any money. So like when you offer maybe 20K, 50K less than the asking price, that actually could be them saying, you know what, I'm done. Right. And so when I look at a deal, we run the deal and we look at the numbers, and we will offer what the numbers tell us we can offer. Right. So I really don't care about the list price. If the numbers tell me I can pay 800 grand, I'll throw in an offer at 800 grand. If they counter me at 9, I walk away, because the number to me is 800. Right. And so like, if you're not making offers, you're not in this business. So
I think that's a good point too. Obviously the offer part, but also like trying to find your own formula for how the numbers can support it. And looking ahead, kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, like, for us with where the value that we're trying to create, it does us no good to try to create value if the rental market doesn't support the rental number that we would need in order to cover the mortgage each month. If we're going to, and that's all, like you said, it goes back to purchase price. If they're asking 500 grand for the lot of land downtown, but our number says if we offer 500, we're going to be losing $400 a month. That does us no good. We're not going to offer 500. That means the number has got to be less. That means our number is somewhere in below 500, and you got to try to find, the way that you see the best formula for it.
Yeah. One thing I actually had a conversation with someone this week about, and this is, you kind of hit it on the head. They were asking me about what they should do in a renovation, right? And I said to them, I go, well, let me ask you a simple question. If you put in new kitchens and new countertops, how much more rent are you going to get, right? The basics, right?
Yep.
And I was like, you take that number, and if it's going to significantly increase and it makes sense, you put in the new kitchens and the countertops. So say you were going to get 1,000, now you're going to get 1,500. It's $500 a month. You look at that over the life of the property, it makes sense. But then I started to talk to them. They're like, yeah, well, I was like, if you put in quartz countertops instead of granite, is the rent going to change? They're like, no, probably not. I go, then don't switch out the quartz don't do quartz countertops. Right. So it's like those simple decisions, understanding what buyers or renters are looking for and if it's going to increase that value. I saw someone send a question. So for lenders, are you using all the same lender? Are you using multiple lenders, and how are you structuring that for your business?
So we use multiple lenders. I'm big on trying to develop relationships with lenders, with banks. We just so happen, because our projects have been in different areas, that we have multiple lenders. But, we try to develop relationships with regional banks or banks that are a little bit smaller, or federal credit unions, different things that, credit unions have different regulations with regards to lending than normal banks do. And regional banks are usually willing to take a little bit more of a risk than national banks, pending your financial status and pending your credit and properties and all that sort of stuff. So, I've tried to, like in Milwaukee, we work with 2 regional banks, and we were going to work with the same one on both projects. Another regional bank, wanted to develop a relationship with us, and they gave us better terms. So, we're trying to develop that relationship with both of them so that we have 2 banks that we can go to moving forward. And I think all those terms, at the beginning of your real estate investing, terms are a little bit less negotiable, if you will. I mean, you may disagree with me, but from what I've seen is they have standard terms. As they start to develop a relationship with you, and as they start to trust your work and your track record, there are some things that I would highly advise, as far as, trying to get personal guarantees off the sheet, or at least make sure that once the project's built or renovated, the personal guarantees start to decrease pretty extremely. And then just, the overall terms of it. Sometimes banks will want you to have a deposit account and move some money over. Sometimes banks won't. And sometimes if you do move some money over, they're willing to, give you a secured line of credit or an unsecured line of credit, which are different, ratios as to what you have there at that bank. But, it's all going to be based off interest rate. It's all going to be based off, fixed interest rate versus floating. And there'll be different terms. And I think at the beginning, kind of like you alluded to, as far as just getting involved as making an offer. At the beginning, you're going to walk into a bank and you're going to be a little bit intimidated by what they're putting in front of you and what you have to sign in order to sign over and get a loan. But as you do it once or twice, and as you say no once or twice, or as you say, hey, I don't want these terms, I want these terms, and as they say no to you once or twice, you'll start to get more comfortable with it. You just don't want to overextend yourself when it comes to the mortgages, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. Things I lecture people on. Work local, right? Go into the local banks and talk to those guys. Talk to the commercial lenders at the local banks. Those are the guys who understand your market and who are actually going to be able to work with you on what a deal is, like an actual good deal, and understand the nuances. Because as we know, one street can be a home run at $500K, and 2 blocks over, that's the worst purchase ever at $500K, and it's 2 blocks. So it's those local lenders understand that stuff, and they're able to actually hire the right appraiser and do all the stuff to make the deal work. The other thing too is when you're getting started, I always say, so maybe you're using hard money as a newbie. You're getting a hard money loan. You can't get bank financing. That's okay, but still go in and talk to that local lender. Go in and tell them, hey, I'm going to be a player. I'm gonna have deals going on, and I want to be a client. I'm not ready right now, but this is what I'm working on. I got 2 projects going. Hey, can you come meet me? Check out my project I'm finishing up. I want to see that you see that I run a good job site. Those lenders will give you the time of day when you come at them in that manner and explain to them that you're going to be a player. You're going to have a lot of deals, and it's worth their time.
For sure, because at the end of the day, that's how you got to understand how they make money. You want to understand their business model, right? Banks make money off, money in their bank and then based off interest on money that they lend out. And so it's in their, it behooves them to lend you money. Now they want to make sure that you're doing things the right way. They want to make sure that they can trust you. But at the end of the day, if you go in and you have that conversation, and even if it doesn't work on the first one, but you have to go hard money or you have to go a different route. You want them to come by the project. You want them to come by the job site. You want to show them what that job turned into, especially if it was obviously successful, because then you're going to start to develop a relationship with them. Then you're going to start to see them come back to you and try to give you some good deals and try to give you some better rates, because if you can show them you're going to be in the actual real estate game and you're going to have more projects, it's dollar signs to them.
Yeah. One thing that we've learned, I learned the hard way is like when a deal finishes and you make your money, stop and take the time to pretty up a nice document and show what you accomplished, show the returns, how the project went, timeline, so that you have it and it's in a folder. So when you start talking to a new bank, you actually can provide them something. You say, hey, I've done 3 projects. Here's my decks. Boom, boom, boom. They're like, oh, damn, this guy really knows what he's doing. Instead of you're like, yeah, I've done 3 projects. They went really well. Well,
For
prove it,
sure.
man.
Yeah,
So
you gotta show that. At the end of the day, they want to see the numbers.
let's see what else we got in here. So yeah, just this is for me. So Adam, it's called Buildium is what I use for my management company. So you can look that up, and that allows you to enter in all your leases, and it's actually pretty user friendly once you get on there. And it's actually the fee starts really small when you have a couple buildings. So like if you have one building, it's barely anything, and then as you add more units, it gets more and more expensive. So it's even like someone with just one property could use it. Let's see.